Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you back to another edition of Foreclosurepedia Podcast. Foreclosurepedia Podcast. It's a presentation of the Foreclosurepedia Radio Network, which premieres each Sunday evening at 2300 hours. A lot of y'all remember the situation with Mid-Ohio, Miken Construction and such. This evening, we're going to speak with one of the auditors, the individuals that was actually assigned to crunch the numbers to make sure everything was going on. This is going to be a hard-hitting interview, ladies and gentlemen. This is going to be a damning interview. As you know, yet another member of the National Association of Mortgage Field Services being implicated in fraud and corruption. So let's go ahead and get underway with this interview this evening. Gia, I appreciate you tuning in with us this evening. How's everything going?
Hi, this is Gia.
Hi, good evening. This is Paul Williams. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, ma'am. I got to call you from a landline. I live way out here in the boonies in East Tennessee, so, I mean, cell phones are like, it's like fiction out here. But I first wanted to thank you for actually reaching out to me. And are you pretty familiar with who I am and what I do, my involvement with Foreclosurepedia?
No, I just was doing a search for Mid-Ohio because I sometimes reply to threads, that contractors create when they try to get pay, and then your thing came up.
Yes, ma'am. What excuse me. What I am is the editor-in-chief of Foreclosurepedia, which is a website, and I actually used to be in the industry working full-time as a contractor, and I just started covering all the the graft and the corruption, and I actually had a guy by the name of David Spillers about two or 3 months ago. He reached out to me and he said, "Hey, look," he said, "I'm having some serious issues with this company. I can't get paid." And at first, I was a little hesitant to believe him, but I reached out to a TV anchor out in, I want to say it was ABC News, and his name was Pedersen, in Arkansas. And, Mr. Pedersen confirmed everything, that Spillers had said.
Yeah, I saw all the news article and everything, and then it led me to your thing, your coverage.
When I go on Google, I look around and I see Mid-Ohio and it says Reynoldsburg, Ohio. But I mean, my understanding was they were actually purchased by, I believe it's pronounced Miken or Miken Construction. I mean, is that pretty much?
Miken. They were purchased July, not this past July, but the July before, or maybe a little bit more earlier ahead. So they are owned by Miken Construction. And it was very hush-hush. The website Mid-Ohio did not even reflect that they were owned by Miken. And Miken also owns an outsourcing company as well that is a very hidden company. And they were outsourcing to a sweatshop in Bangladesh. So Miken owns a few companies, but they try to kind of keep them separate. But when they bought out Mid-Ohio, they started funneling the work orders to us too. So we all knew it was happening.
Do you happen to know the outfit, the outsourcing outfit in Bangladesh by any chance?
Well, the company that Miken owns is called Catella, Katella.
Because I'm looking through, as you give me these names, I'm looking through on the internet to look at them. Let's see, Catella.
The website is getkps.com.
Get Kilo Papa Sierra.
Yep.
There it is. Catella committed to property. Wow, there it is.
And it's
go
definitely
ahead.
Owned by Miken. We had I found business cards that weren't supposed to be seen at Miken, and Miken, if you look at the names of the people that are involved with Catella, they also work for Miken. It is a Miken company. Danielle Witten dropped off the business cards for the people that worked at Miken for Catella. And I actually sat, because I was an auditor, I sat away from all the processors. I sat next to the outsourcing manager who would go and live in Bangladesh. And it was insane how abusive they were to the people. Like he would be telling them, nobody gets paid today, do not pay those workers because they didn't meet their quota. So they were getting paid, and if they didn't meet the quota, they'd spend 12 hours there and not even, it was just crazy.
Holy cow. Wow. And, wait, excuse me, when you were doing the auditing and such, this is one of the things that's really curious about, because there's a young lady who reached out to me, and her name slips me right now. It was a Hispanic lady out in California, and she had told me that she was processing both pre and post conveyance properties, i.e., bank owned and HUD owned properties, and I said, if you're processing HUD properties, I said you have to be paid in direct correlation to the Service Contract Act, which is far different pay schedules. So as opposed to, say, for example, they could work you on bank-owned properties at minimum wage or maybe, $7-8 an hour. But on SCA, you have to be paid prevailing wage. You have to receive medical benefits. You have to receive PTO, and you have to receive other benefits. And I tried to get her involved because you can easily file a claim both with the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development and also
I would love that. They promised me when I was the auditor, I am not even kidding you, and when they shut the company down, they shut all our computers, so all of my proof was lost because they took it from us. I saved the company over $1 million. In my auditing, I had $1 million of fines of errors that the processors and the contractors were making, and I was promised cash bonuses, and I was making $13 an hour, and they strung me along, and then one day the whole company just was shut down and then transferred over to Mid-Ohio. And so so she was, if she was an REO and PPO processor, it had to have been, it was either Alessa or...
It was a Hispanic name, I know that. I know she has a child, and the
child...
Yeah,
I know who it is. That's crazy.
Corinna.
Corinna?
Well, the child was having some type of heart issues. I don't know if it's a transplant, but there's some type of major surgery going on. Maybe this would have been about a month ago. I actually interviewed her for my podcast.
Does she have 2 little girls?
I don't know how many she has. I know the one was pretty bad off. And
I think it would be Corinna. She worked for the company for a while.
That sounds like the name, yes, ma'am. And and so I spoke with her, and I had tried to move her over, with the United States Department of Labor to file a claim, and the claims when you're filing, with the Service Contract Act, these are very cut and dry. The United States government comes in, represents you. There's absolutely no issues whatsoever. And the reality is, especially right now, the United States government has an unfunded mandate called Obamacare, and so the government, has a vested interest in getting all the tax dollars that they can.
Yeah.
But I tell you what,
you're talking about Corinna. She was an auditor as well. So she did a lot of REO PPO processing, and then she did some auditing, but I was the main auditor.
You said that when they were bought out by Mid-Ohio, do you mean?
When Miken bought Mid-Ohio.
Okay, and you officially work for Miken?
Yes.
And I'm looking at something on the internet that says MikenConstruction.com. Is that company one and the same?
Yes.
Very good. Well, I tell you, I'm real interested. I'm real interested in this story for several reasons. A, because, and being very blunt, I have one agenda and one agenda only, and that's to bring, a leveled landscape to the industry. I think that there's right and wrong. I'm a decorated combat veteran, so when I went to war, when we received our marching orders, it wasn't that we fought for the rich or we fought for the poor, we fought for Americans. And so when I came back home, I thought this was an industry I could get into, wouldn't be a lot of issues, I could be left alone. And so what I started noticing, for want of better words, was just one giant Ponzi scheme.
Oh, it's nuts. I mean, we were charging $95 to cap one wire. Imagine you have 60 wires in a house. We were paying the contractor 50 cents a wire. We might get $6,000 to cap wires in a house that did not even have electricity running to it, and we gave the contractor $20. I mean, it's really nuts. We would put like plumbing into a house, and the contractor would call and say, there's people watching, they're going to come and take it right when I leave, and we would say, it's pre-approved, do it, it doesn't matter. We would put in dehumidifiers in properties in Detroit that would be gone the next day, hot water heaters. I mean, it was like nuts. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yes, ma'am. I'm very familiar with it. I'm actually I'm involved in. If you do a little research around about me, you'll find I'm actually involved in multiple investigations, and I'll just put it like that. A lot of people have wondered whether or not I work for the United States government in some capacity, and I used to do intelligence for the government, but I always tell people, you know, whether I do or do not work for any official agency is immaterial, because if you're committing a crime, you're committing a crime. And but I'm a little bit more curious. I'd like to speak with you a little bit. What was your official title with Miken Construction?
I was quality control auditor.
And were you a W-2 or a 1099?
I was a W-2.
So you would let me ask you this, because I might be able to point you in some good directions. In any of the time that you ever worked on any of those orders, or you ever saw any orders, did any of those orders begin with 3 numbers, have a dash, and then have 6 numbers? And the reason I ask is because that generally is what designates a HUD property.
Oh, they were all HUD properties.
If they were all HUD properties, I can tell you, I'm not giving you legal advice naturally, but I can tell you without any reasonable doubt whatsoever that the law was very clear that you were to be paid prevailing wage. Now, what that means is a lot of people call prevailing wage union scale. For example, now this is just a random number I'm going to throw out there, but you know, a secretary might or an auditor. And see, when you use the term auditor, that connotates a hell of a lot of money. I'll tell you that. My guess, you know, anywhere from 18 to maybe 40 some dollars an hour is what you were supposed to have paid. Anything over 8 hours became overtime, and obviously anything over 40 hours became overtime. But additionally, you were to be compensated with a health care package. You were to be compensated with paid time off. You're to be compensated with other benefits, you know, 401k, et cetera, ad nauseum. And, you know, this, you know, what I will do as a separate deal is I will definitely reach out to my connections at the United States Department of Labor and also within the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, and we'll get you fast-tracked on that. I have no vested interest. I don't want a single penny. I just think, you know, when people get screwed, you know, you got to do something about it.
Oh, yeah, we got screwed. I watched the male auditors who were doing work getting cash bonuses. People were getting cash bonuses under the table. I mean, they were getting money in an envelope, cash in an envelope. And Karina would get cash in an envelope, too. And I was promised, I reported that some people were like playing the system and that they were getting the cash bonuses by skewing numbers, and they took the envelope cash bonuses away, and I was auditor, and they said that I would get a bonus. And I waited and waited and waited, and I never got my bonus, and then they closed the company down. They never gave it to me in writing that they would give me a bonus, but I felt that the amount of money that I had saved the company, it was insane. It was, I mean, it'd be like one day I'd find $50,000 worth of errors sometimes that people would make. And we were doing, so HUD properties would be FHA loans, right?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. Well, HUD properties could have an FHA note. For example, FHA merely underwrites, you know, a tremendous amount of loans. Generally what happens is virtually any mortgage other than a conventional, at some point in time, if it doesn't sell early, is going to work its way from pre-conveyance or the bank-owned REO side over to what's called post-conveyance. And so, and the way you know that is that it's a HUD property is it no longer says, like, you know, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, U.S. Bank, anything like that. And it always has those 3 numbers, a dash, and then 6 numbers. That's the property identifier. When it's on the HUD side, generally, now I'm speaking from a contractor point of view. I've never worked, if you will, the management side. But that's all we ever saw was those 3 numbers dash 6 numbers, whereas on pre-conveyance, we generally saw the loan number or something. So you'd have 10, 15 numbers, that was the identifier.
We had property ID numbers. I can't remember, and also in our system it might have been different than what it officially was. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I absolutely did.
But these were HUD properties, and I know that they were HUD because the stuff was FHA loans, and I think that they were HUD houses. They'd start out in PPO, and then some of them would go into REO.
Right.
So would that mean that they were HUD?
It would mean that they could be HUD. This would be something that DOL and HUD itself would actually step in and take a look at. And additionally, anybody working in that office, they're going to pull everybody's information, because everybody would in theory be entitled to compensation, much like you hear the term class action litigation. And this so SCA is one aspect of that. There's a ton of possible benefits that you guys may perhaps have been entitled to. Well, one thing I'm real curious about is you're talking about cash and envelopes. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Because this splashes like mafia shit to me, man. Well, they'd literally come around and say, "Hey, you did a great job. Here's an envelope full of cash," as opposed to putting it on the payroll check.
Yes, every week. If you hit a certain quota, you would get an envelope of cash. It could be as much as $200, $300, $400. And some people did better than others. And the temps were not privy to this cash system, and it was cash bonuses, and it wasn't reported. It was in an envelope.
See that alone, that alone is criminal. It's not criminal if anybody received the cash. What the criminal component, this is, I guess, more. Well, I don't think it's just opinion. I think it's categorically criminal, because if there are financial transactions that should have been subjected to income tax review, and taxes paid to the IRS, taxes paid to FICA. What state are you in?
California.
Oh my God! Yeah, see,
it was totally you all. Anyway, I know that it was.
Y'all out there on the left coast. There would have been a tremendous. So California Department of Labor would have come unglued. So that, who overall was in charge of distributing? Was there one person that came around and handed them out, or how did that work?
The money came from Danielle Witten. She brought the money in the envelopes, and it was distributed by either Anna Chris Quizada, who you are familiar with.
Yes.
Or the unit manager, Melissa Yanez, or the manager of the entire department of the processing unit, who was Carlis Boatner Johnson. Oh. Carlis actually was a pretty cool lady, and she's the one that did away with the cash bonus system.
And did she say why she did that, or?
Well, I complained to her that people were getting it and other people weren't, and the people that were getting it were just skewing the numbers, and that it was ridiculous, and that and she then investigated it, and she realized that the company was just giving people cash bonuses that weren't even necessarily the best performers, and so she did away with it.
Who were some of y'all's clients? Because you say you're an auditor, so I presume, or actually explain that to me. What do you mean, and what did your job per se consist of?
I would look at completed work orders before they were uploaded to the client. The client was Bank of America, and then Safeguard, some other smaller, but it was mainly Bank of America Field Services Division before it was bought out by Safeguard. So I would look at the work orders after the processors were done processing them. I would look and see that they were bidding on all the damages, because they would often miss damages that the bank would then nail us for. I would look and see that the contractors did the work correctly. I would look and make sure that the contractors went to the correct house. I would look and make sure completed all the work, that we had the photo proof. Just, anything like that, that we billed correctly, that we paying the contractor correctly. So I would look at all that.
What were, and that's interesting, you said Bank of America Field Services prior to their purchase. I just interviewed, and I'm working on a huge bio story, when Bank of America was bought out from Safeguard, for want of better words, for being an entire clusterfuck. That he was telling me, he said, look, man, he said, you have no idea of the level of corruption that came down. He said, Safeguard Properties wasn't even, technologically competent enough to move the information. Bank of America, I guess, apparently was concerned about the transmission of data, and their information architecture was so dated. It was like DOS 3.0 that they had to actually give out laptops, to the people coming over. But I'm curious about that. Can you give me like an idea? Like let's say a winterization or a cubic, yard. I mean, things like that. What grass cuts? What were the price points on stuff like that?
Everything rapidly dropped. I'm trying to look and see if I have any documents, because I do have a couple here. So everything rapidly went downhill after Safeguard was bought. Whereas before we were making an absurd and disturbing amount of money, Safeguard, when they took control, they must have been taking it all, because then we became just like another contractor, where we were making about as much as our contractors did. So do you want to know pre or post Safeguard?
Well, I'd kind of like to know both. I mean, I'm just curious number-wise, and I'll be very blunt why I'm asking that. I have a theory, and my theory goes something like this, that there is a tremendous amount of money that the banks and such are paying out. And by the time that it runs through the order mills and the contractors are paid those amounts, it obviously, drastically is reduced. Now, the reason that I think that's very important is because at the end of the day, taxpayer monies are being injected, if you will, to the financial institutions. So I'll give you an example. Myself as a contractor, I go change a lock, and generally by the time it hits me, it's anywhere from, $15 to $40. It just depends. But when that bill is submitted to the United States government, buying through FHA, and to the homeowner, because the homeowner also gets billed via 1099, it's billing out at $100 or $200 a whack. And if the contractors are never receiving that money, then in my opinion, that's a false claim. And so that's why I'm curious about, just a couple of price points. Let's say at a winterization or a simple lock and maybe a grass cut, what those items paid, what Bank of America say was paying then versus what Safeguard per se was paying out towards the end when you were, before you had left.
All right. Well, I used to know it, off the top of my head, but it's been a year now. I'm trying to think. So,
like you were talking about the wires, the wire capping, and you said that
one I remember, because that was the most egregious.
Wow, $90-some a cap. I mean, that's insane.
Yeah, and you'd have 50 caps in a house, and the contractor's getting 50 cents a cap. That was insane. So, winterizations.
And it's not that big of a deal, because with your permission, I would actually like to take the time at your convenience over a very long period of time, and in essence find out everything that I can that and I would also like, with your permission, to probably introduce you to some very large law firms. Within litigation, there's a concept called qui tam, and that's Latin. And basically what it means is a whistleblower. And whistleblowers are entitled to a tremendous amount of money for simply stepping forward and saying, hey, you know what? This is wrong, and this is what I know about it that is wrong. And so generally when the lawyers launch this litigation, and especially when it impacts, billing against the United States government, the government comes in, let's use a round number. Let's say the government says, well, okay, you know what? We lost $1 million here. Well, the whistleblower is entitled to a percentage of the entirety of those funds. And so, there's a very distinct possibility that, in the next year or two, you could just retire.
But I have no proof because they shut down the computer, and I knew I should have taken screenshots. I mean, it would have been so easy, and I just...
That's actually not that big of a deal because of the fact that you have what's called first-hand knowledge. And with that first-hand knowledge, then what happens is when law firms become involved, what they do is they file what's called motions for discovery. And here's the deal. By law, these companies have to retain 7 years of information. And when any of this information is destroyed or shredded or lost, what happens is you have a slam dunk case. And so those companies then, they're paying X amount of dollars. I receive nothing from it. I don't get a penny from it. I just merely get to expose the corruption, which is what my bag is,
Oh, yeah, it's really disgusting. I can tell you one thing that really upset me was the contractors would go to a house and there'd be live animals in the house, and they would actually, we wouldn't even bill them as live animals. We would just bill them as dead animals and wait till they died and then remove the bodies because that's how we could make money instead of calling animal control. And I put a stop to that, actually.
Whoa, walk me back through that again. So a contractor, let's say on an initial service or what have you, has first-hand knowledge that there is an animal that is alive in a property.
Yes, in Detroit, let's say.
Okay.
And it's a dog locked in a house, a foreclosed house. They would not call animal control. We wouldn't call animal control. And then we would bill it as dead animal removal because by the time that Bank of America got around to processing their end of the work order, the animal would already be dead, and then we would remove it. And I put a stop to that, but it happened many, many times.
How
you're talking crazy stuff went on in this. It's the industry is so nuts that it's unbelievable.
How high up the chain of command did that knowledge go? I mean, i.e., who is the highest person in charge of, say, Miken or Mid-Ohio or Catella that ever had knowledge, first-hand knowledge, or it had ever been communicated to them that there were live animals inside of inside of these properties, any property, even just one?
I assume that people would have mentioned it to managers before me because it was disturbing, but I don't know. When I mentioned it to my unit manager, she said that it didn't matter to just complete the work order and Bank of America would deal with it. But we knew that Bank of America sometimes wouldn't look at our work orders for weeks. And so then I went to the owner of the company's sister, who was a manager somehow, even though she was just a real estate agent, but whatever. She managed the contracting end. Her name was Angie Newman. And she got very upset, and then she put a stop to it, and we made a new policy where if there was a live animal, we called animal control.
And who was your unit manager?
The processing manager's name was Melissa Yanez.
Okay, very good. And could you give me a rough estimate of time?
I remember her name. I remember it was Corinna Castaneda was the other auditor, but she was mainly a processor.
Right. And can you give me a rough estimate of time of how long that practice, if you will, was ongoing?
I don't know, years, because I only worked for the company for a year and a half or something, and it was going on.
So is it fair to say that while you worked there, from anywhere from 1 to 6 or 8 months, that Miken Construction knew there was live animals in these properties? Yeah. Very good.
Definitely. And I even remember the name of the contractor who let the one dog starve to death because it really upset me. I mean, I was auditing a work order, and I saw a dead animal removal, and I was like, what the hell? We've been to this property before. And the dog was dead, and it had been eating insulation. It was just so horrible. And I went back to the initial service order, and the dog was sitting there looking through the window. And the contractor wrote, dog inside I won't enter. And so we just let him starve to death.
Wow.
And the contractor's name is Michael Ramsayer.
Wow. Wow. This was a Michigan work order then?
Yes. How did you know that?
Why, I'm curious because I said that because you said Detroit a couple of times, so I'm presuming that the heavy concentration of everything would be up in Michigan. Probably for
Chicago. It was Chicago and Detroit where most of our work orders were. It could have been Chicago, actually. Maybe it was Chicago. Now I'm trying to think of which state Michael was in.
But it wasn't in California.
Oh, no.
Did that pattern or practice ever occur within the state of California that you're aware of?
I wouldn't know. I didn't handle California work orders or auditing.
So you mainly had, like, for one, in the military we called it a desk. So your desk mainly covered out east?
Yeah, Chicago and Detroit.
Right.
And surrounding, yes.
Can you give me some other, examples of patterns or practices of things that you felt, whether legal or ethical, that Miken Construction was just, over the top, beyond the pale of what should be acceptable in the industry? I know we had touched a little bit on the pricing, and that's probably more of, it may be a legal deal. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. But the dog thing, to me, people like PETA would have a field day on that, and not to mention the fact that it's probably criminal. But are there other? I tell you what, I'm really curious about. I'm working on a huge story, and I also moved a contractor over to a huge law firm for a qui-tam on insurance claims. And this contractor worked for an outfit called Five Brothers, which is owned by Joe Badalamenti. And,
we used to do work with Five Brothers. I'm familiar with them.
Okay, well, I'm breaking huge information on good old Joe, Grandpa Joe, I like to call him. But what happened was Joe had just a shit pile of orders from U.S. Bank, and he was processing all these insurance claims on behalf of U.S. Bank, and what they would do was they would go ahead and they would send contractors out to properties, and they would say that, okay, they'd get the initial inspection, and it would say all this stuff is jacked up. And they'd tell the contractor to meet with law enforcement and file a vandalism report. And I'm curious if you guys, if Miken or Mid-Ohio ever had contractors go out and do insurance claims or inspections or anything.
Yeah, we would do inspections.
Did Miken ever was Miken ever involved with actually sending contractors out to do work? I'll tell you the big deal. What happened with Five Brothers was, for example, this contractor that I'm working with, Kelly Brown. Excuse me. He's out of I believe the town's called Hastings, Michigan. But anyway, they sent him out. They said, hey, you need to file a police report and state that because of vandalism, the roof is leaking, the driveway's busted up, porch is all jacked up, etc. ad nauseum. And that's categoric insurance fraud. And, so I was curious.
Yeah, we would do stuff like that. Part of when you create a bid for a property was that you had to create a reason why that had happened. Why is this way? So let's say all the plumbing is ripped out. You would say vandalism. Let's say that there was a fire damage. You'd say fire damage. If there's mold, you'd say roof leaking. Vandalism was a great one to put because those were more often approved.
Right, and that's the deal with Five Brothers, and what the allegations that Kelly Brown, myself, and there's a tremendous amount of litigation going on right now because of the fact that Assurant which is an enormous insurance conglomerate. They recently just bought Field Asset Services. But one of their subsidiaries is called ASIC, American Security Insurance Company, I believe it's called. Well, anyway, they'd come in, they'd double slam this insurance after the homeowner left, and they would go to they'd go into the property and they say, okay, we got all this shit that's wrong, but we want the contractor to go out and file the police report and base it upon vandalism so that now we have the legal basis to come in and do the work. And I also want to be real clear. I know you continue to say, yes, we would do all this, but I don't think that's a fair statement. I think the more fair statement is that Miken or your superiors would do things. So I want to be real clear on that, you know, and I think you should also catalog that in the back of your head. I'm not saying it's a Nuremberg, you know, defense or whatever, but in essence, you were an auditor. So I don't get the impression, nor do I believe, you know, that you were per se doing anything. So I want to be real clear so you understand truly what I think and everything.
Well, I don't know that we would file false police reports or file police reports, but we would state, you know, why the damage was done.
Right. So the listing of the why or how something occurred, so that was discretionary within your all's office, for want of better words? Mm-hmm. Okay. Did you guys ever, did Miken or Mid-Ohio or anybody ever work with an outfit called the Wounded Warrior Project or anything like that?
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
And can you tell me, and before you tell me anything, I'll tell you why I'm asking. You know, Dale McPherson, the former owner of Field Asset Services, was involved in an enormous debacle with Wounded Warrior Project and with J.P. Morgan Chase, as the story goes, because I don't have anything tangible in my possession, but a project manager was involved in dipping into the pot, and so the whole contract went south. But I'm rather curious about how many companies out there were actually, for want of better words, you know, rehabbing homes or trying to get veterans into homes. And did you guys ever do stuff like that, or did Miken or Mid-Ohio?
Miken definitely did. In fact, you can probably, while it still exists, screenshot, because I think it says that we worked with Wounded Warrior Project on MikenConstruction.com. I don't know anything about it because it wasn't in my division. It was like a separate thing.
Right.
A separate team.
If you could, now were you on board during the transition from Mid-Ohio to becoming completely housed, if you will, under Miken Construction, the buyout? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And can you give me kind of a snapshot of how that whole, at least how, with specificity to what you knew, I mean, that dealt with your desk, can you tell me how that whole thing kind of panned out?
Well, it was not this past July, but the July before that, Miken announced that they had bought a company, Mid-Ohio. It was very hush-hush. It was definitely bought before July. We kind of knew it because some people in the accounting department started working for Mid-Ohio. So we could tell, you know, that they were working for Mid-Ohio now. Suddenly they had more accounting department. And then some people that were favorites of Danielle Witten just disappeared and went to go work on a special project. And they weren't supposed to talk about it, but they let it slip. So eventually the company said, we own this company now, and, you know, that's about it. But we did a lot of their accounting in-house at Miken Construction after the buyout.
And after the buyout, for want of better words, you know, were there any notices or anything sent out that you ever saw? Like, I mean, your contractors, I'm sure at one point in time, these were contractors that worked directly for Mid-Ohio. Was there like a mass email or anything that went out and said, hey, you know, good morning, you don't work for Mid-Ohio, you work for Miken?
No, they had no idea, and their website didn't reflect it, like, at all. Ever. They still stated that the old owners of the company own the company.
Really? I mean, that's, I tell you what, this story, not only from go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I emailed Safeguard and let them know.
So Mid-Ohio at no point in time advised anybody, and it was more like Miken, when they felt that they wanted to, they simply told people and said, hey, by the way, we own Mid-Ohio now.
Yep.
And that's inclusive not only of the order mills, and that's what I call like Miken, Mid-Ohio, or Safeguard, but that's inclusive even of Safeguard. Safeguard had no idea that Mid-Ohio didn't even exist, as far as you knew?
Yep, they had no idea. Yep.
Wow. I mean, it's I often tell people two things. I say, if you want to get rich, take out life insurance on me, because at some point in time, they're going to whack me. And I also tell people, at some point in time, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to get away from the website. I'm going to write a book, because truth is definitely stranger than fiction. And in this case, I mean, we are talking about fraud, corruption, and deceit at levels that I have. You know, I did intelligence, you know, for the United States, for the Department of the Navy. You know, I mean, I was in the Navy, I enlisted, and I'd seen strange stuff, but I have never, speaking with, you know, courageous people like yourself and others, I've never heard of anything like this. I mean, this is like, you know, the Godfather on steroids.
Oh, it's nuts. I mean, they literally bought Mid-Ohio, kept it hush-hush until they couldn't anymore because we all figured it out. And then we were double dipping. So we were taking orders as Miken, and then we were taking orders as Mid-Ohio.
And when you say double dipping, I mean, did that end up becoming like double billing as well, or?
No, I don't think so. I don't know. But what I mean is that because Safeguard had no idea that we also owned Mid-Ohio, when they were giving us orders after the buyout, Miken was really messing them up. And we weren't filling them on time. And so they had no idea that they were, even if they were penalizing us, they didn't know that we also own Mid-Ohio. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Like they had no idea. I mean, and I was buddy with the head accountant was Anacris, who I don't even think is a real accountant. But then there was a guy, Jose, who he did the financials for the whole company. And Anacris, you know, she wasn't an educated person. She was just some schmuck. I mean, I don't even know how she got the job, although I think she got the job because she was dumb enough to turn a blind eye. But the guy that he was doing something with accounting. He drove an extremely fancy BMW, and I was buddy with him because I sat next to him as the auditor. He was like, we sat in no man's land because people weren't supposed to look at our stuff. And
sure.
He was showing me that the company was making out like a bandit, and I don't even know why he would show it to me, but it was like the company would pull in $1 million in profits. I mean, in a month. It was so crazy.
Now this person who would show you this stuff, I'm going to presume that they were involved with the accounting aspect, you know, the crunching of numbers, and that you were an auditor. And so is it fair to state that you were not a CPA and that you really had no need to know to see any of that information?
Oh, yeah, I had no need to know. He was just doing it because he was saying, look at this is so ridiculous.
Wow. I mean, are you aware, other than the David Spiller's situation that I'd brought up, and I believe it was ABC News brought up as well, were you ever aware of any contractors whom had ever said, hey, we haven't been paid and we really need to be paid, i.e., you know, just basically flat out being told, hey, fuck you, we're not going to pay you, anything like that?
Yeah, a lot of contractors wouldn't get paid and then they would freak out.
Did Miken Construction, and I don't know if this would really, you know, impact you. I haven't seen an organizational manual on them yet, but Was there any type of grievance or administrative remedy process? I.e., let's say I was a contractor. Let's say I went out. I don't know. I built a handrail, and
we did. We had one person who was in charge of dealing with discrepancies. Like if we didn't pay a contractor because we said that they didn't do the work right, they would complain, and she would review and see.
Wow.
Her name was Amber Flores.
and so, in essence, and I want to make sure I understand this correctly, Miken construction, everything that you're kind of describing, like the office and everything, now that was out in California, correct?
Yes.
Excellent. And is there anything right up to what we've discussed so far that really sticks out in your head? I know the animal situation is horrific, but is there anything, whether it's ethical or you felt that's illegal, that you really think it is very important to say, hey, you know what, I think that this was tremendously screwed up, and this would be something that needs to be looked at as well?
Well, putting in plumbing and hot water heaters and dehumidifiers in houses that are completely decrepit and where there are people actually standing across the street waiting for the contractor to leave so they can go in and take the stuff, and us doing it anyway because we know we're going to get paid, is ridiculous.
Would the contractor, so contractor John Doe rolls up, there on 8 Mile and says, hey, so I have this work order to install this stuff. Would the contractor, would they email or call and say, hey, just as soon as I install this, it's going to be gone?
Yes.
So is it, and how high up, your best guess, up the chain of command is, what I call everything like that. How high up do you think it went up the chain of command that at Miken Construction that people knew that what they were doing, i.e. that work order and what they were installing, really was only going to be there, say, an hour or a day or whatever?
I think that the owners of the company were aware that this is what was happening. I mean, we all knew it.
When you say owners, I mean like who?
John Christian, who was Danielle Witten's father, and Danielle Witten.
Wow. See, excuse me, that's pretty serious and damning. And I want to be real clear why I'm asking you so many questions like this, and hopefully, if you're willing, I would like to, just continue to follow up. And the reason is this: I would like to take a lot of this information. I would like to, background it, and I would like to turn this eventually over to people whom can examine it and say, hey, you know what, this was either legal or this was illegal. And if it was illegal, I think that the owners or whomever else in that chain of command that had active and ongoing knowledge need to be brought to justice. Because at the end of the day, just like yourself, I'm a taxpayer. And at the end of the day, the monies that all, flowed back through the banks and through HUD and everybody else, hey, that's my dollar. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the other deal that I'm real huge on, anybody you worked with there, and I don't care what they're doing. I don't care, excuse me, if they were the receptionist or anybody. Everybody who might even have the shred of hope that they should have been paid in accordance with the Service Contract Act, things such as Davis-Bacon. I want to do everything that I can to bring to bear the power of the United States government to pay you folks. Because at the end of the day, that is completely wrong. I started my career, years and years ago, when I got out of the war, I was digging ditches out in California, out in Santa Cruz. I spoke enough Spanish to get by, and that was the only reason I had a job. But, I knew at that point in time that it was wrong. What I was being paid was wrong. But I knew that. With you folks, here's a situation where nobody even wanted to tell you guys, you ladies and gentlemen, what you were supposed to be paid. And to me, that's horrifically wrong. And it would be my opinion that obviously the owners of the company knew precisely what the Service Contract Act was and precisely whom was to be paid what and why. And if they didn't...
We were told that if we talked about pay and how much we made, that we would lose our jobs. We were told we were not allowed to discuss each other's pay or discuss how much anybody made, or that if it was heard that we would be instantly fired.
Now, something like that is probably somewhat legal because therein, you're talking about it might be illegal if it's like a man comparing his pay to a woman or vice versa. But with specificity to SCA, if the owners did not know, or if anybody else whom was in charge, of the payroll system and such like that did not inform the employees, if they didn't know, at minimum, that's gross negligence. That's malfeasance. At best, and I say best because I'm the type of person that wants to see many of these people put, preferably in Pelican Bay, with soap and no rope on it, or worst case scenario, so that they can never function within this industry. It's just, it's horrifically wrong.
Does Mid-Ohio still exist?
Well, according to Google, they do. I tried to pull their filings. I didn't see a tax return for last year. That doesn't mean anything, but here was also the other deal. This was called the Warren Act, and that's William Alpha Romeo November. And whenever there's supposed to be mass layoffs, or when there's a merger of a company from one company to another, the departments of labor in every state, wherein those transactions are occurring, those departments of labor are supposed to be informed. I mean, that's state and federal law. I saw no Warren Act notifications. There are actually two people, one in Texas, a lady who used to work for Mid-Ohio. Her name was Peggy Carino. Does that name strike a bell?
No.
Well, and she had no bigger play in the deal, but when Mid-Ohio was purchased, she had no job. And so, so my curiosity becomes, for how long were those books cooked, for want of better words, i.e., what company was fielding what debt to make the other company's P&L look favorable. And, and that's an opinion, that's a hunch. And, when I do these investigations, it usually takes, 2, 3, 4 months, for me to really sit.
Okay, I think I know what you're talking about. So when the financial guy who I sat next to, when I talked to him, and the company, everybody was freaking out at Miken because we said we were doing all of a sudden so badly. He said, yeah, but look at Mid-Ohio. Look at how much they're making now. Is that what he meant, that we were funneling our money into Mid-Ohio somehow and making it look like they were making more money? Is that what?
It very well could be, and then you get into multiple other possibilities, i.e., when Miken came in to buy out Mid-Ohio, the question becomes, and I'm going to give you a mafia example. When the mafia would come in to buy a company, or a company needed protection, what they would do is they would take that company. It would be a legitimate company on the outs, or a consigliere would come forward. The lawyer or the advisor would come forward, create a company to buy out the company that wanted protection. And they would begin to rack up just ungodly amounts of debt, borrow every note that there was, and every product that could be bought, it would go out the back door. And then, eventually when there was no more debt that could be added to that company, they would either torch the joint, or in the case of hypothetically with Mid-Ohio and Miken, if Mid-Ohio became the recipient of ungodly amounts of debt and tons of capital bled off it, in theory, it could become a good candidate for bankruptcy. And if a scenario like that took place, then you get into, obviously, RICO, which is federal racketeering. We're talking about the crossing of state lines using electronic means to further an ongoing artifice, or or scheme. Safeguard Properties is actually staring down an enormous federal racketeering suit in the United States District Court for the Western District of Pennsylvania. I spoke with the lawyer on that. Now, I'm not a lawyer. It may sound like I'm a lawyer. I've just read a lot. I studied it, because of the fact that I think, and this is probably before your time, and it's a little before mine. I'm 44. But there was a huge thing called the Pentagon Papers back in the 70s. And what happened was you had a lot of people within the defense industry that said, hey, excuse me, they said, hey, there's all kinds of corruption and graft and greed, and we want to do something about it. And the government wouldn't listen. And so what they did was they went out and they literally found a reporter, and they took her and they funneled monies to actually buy an enormous building, and they began to funnel all this information over. And eventually, after the litigations all came down and there was some reform, they then became known as POGO, which was the Project on Government Oversight. And, within this industry, with the situation of Miken construction in mid-Ohio, this is just one of hundreds. And so what I've been doing is drilling down. I'll find a company and then I'll track down where did it begin, who started it, and then whom are those people associated with. For example, you take Safeguard Properties. Well, you have Klein, you have RIK, you have RJH Holdings down in Miami, you have connections with Benjamin Assets out where you guys are at. These are literally tentacles of just an enormous octopus. And I think at the end of the day, all of the insanity is all interconnected. And the one common theme behind all of this is an outfit called the National Association of Mortgage Field Services. All these companies are all members of it. And, just I'm not saying that NAMFS woke up, one day and said, hey, let's get involved, in organized crime. But I am saying that all these companies all have a common origin, which is the membership, if you will, in NAMFS. And I don't believe in coincidence. I spent a lot of time in the military. I did a lot of interesting things. And, I never saw any coincidence in life. None. Everything, if you track everything back, you can always find a common denominator.
Well, I actually have to go to work. I have to get ready for work. So we only have Excellent. 10 minutes left. But what do you think? What can be done? Where can we go from here?
What I would like to do is I would like to set up, with you at your convenience a time. I'll put together a tremendous amount of questions. I'll never release, your last name or anything because it's. Well, let me ask you this. Are you currently still working within the property preservation industry?
No.
Okay, so it wouldn't impact you, but regardless, I'm not going to release your last name. What I would like to do is several things. First thing I'd like to do is get as much information as I can, compile it down, and reach out to a lot of my sources. Because first and foremost, we need to see whether or not we can get you and hopefully some of your colleagues monies that are well deserved, all right, under SCA and other things. Also, hopefully, a Quietam lawsuit. The second thing, bring enormous, attention to what's going on with specificity to Miken construction. This Catella, that's a huge deal over in Bangladesh. Wells Fargo is pulling the plug on all kinds of contracts because they didn't want anything farmed out over in there. And then the third deal as well is that I want to bring people to justice. The deal with the animal thing, that I'm still thinking about that. That shot straight through my head. I'm not a soft guy. You ask around, I'm known as two things, an asshole and Jimmy Hoffa, and both are true. But, when you know that something that has no power is going to be harmed just to make a dollar, no, that don't fly in my world. So what Go ahead.
And one thing I did want to mention to you that you could do more research into is Miken Construction, all the higher-ups were family members. All the kind of below higher-ups were morons. they had morons working directly below the family members, I think for a reason. But Drew Christian, which is Danielle Witten's brother, he worked for a company for 2 years called National Foreclosure Relief, and they were shut down by the FTC. And I find that really interesting.
That's Federal Trade Commission, right?
Yeah.
I'll have to take. There's the lawsuit right there. David Ely apparently brought a case against him. Well, let's do this now. Did you get the email from me that responded? I guess you had reached out to my Google Plus. That's how you got a hold of me. I want to make sure you have all. Okay, excellent. So all our contact information is there. Let's look at your calendar. Excuse me, at your convenience. Let's set up a time, have an informal call. First thing tomorrow, I'm going to reach out to my associates, the United States Department of Labor and also the California Department of Labor, and see about fast-tracking immediately the pay. Let's get that together. Were you paid direct deposit or by check?
Direct deposit.
Okay, excellent. So your bank's going to have all that information. So, this is slam dunk. And, we'll talk a little bit more, and then we'll figure out where you're comfortable at, what direction you want to move on the other deals, whether it's Qui-Tam. But ultimately, I just want to be very clear. Other than getting you guys some money, my main intention is if I can put these people in jail, I want them in jail for a very long time.
Oh, yes.
Excellent.
They're horrible people.
Excellent.
I mean, they are so horrible that when I saw your articles, I was like, I'm not going to let this go, because I really felt wronged by what they did. I mean, really, really felt wronged. And, all my fellow employees, too. I mean.
Well, if you will, in the meantime, circulate perhaps an email to people you used to work with and say, hey, I spoke with this guy, he's got a deep voice. He sounds like an asshole, but, he thinks we're all entitled to monies, maybe get a group email going on that. Because like I say, first thing in the morning when I get up out here, Eastern time, I'm on the phone to DOL. I'm going to get a case open simply because I have the ability to do that. And then going forward from there, let's do what we can do to bring these people to justice. I want to reiterate, I think you're a very, brave and courageous lady. And I'll tell you, the ball's in your court. California, you guys have just enormous laws that are in your favor out there. I mean, they reward financially, people coming forward and saying, hey, you know what, this was wrong. So while I may not be a liberal, I will say that your guys' laws out there, I mean, they're excellent. They're off the charts. So, but just.
So I have, the one person that I've stayed in contact with who's a friend of mine, she worked in the accounting department. She worked in the Miken accounting department and then began working in the Mid-Ohio accounting department after the switch.
Right.
Would she be somebody that would have been entitled to higher pay? She was only making $11 an hour.
Anybody, yeah. If they touched any properties that were in the HUD portfolio, automatic. There's no questions asked on that. The rest of them, there's a finer line, and this would be more for DOL to take a look at, both state and federal. But yes, slam dunk. I don't care if it's the person, if you guys hired a janitor there. Anybody who had access to or had anything to do with HUD properties was entitled to prevailing wage. And later on this evening, I'll get you out a listing for the state of California stating precisely. There's like 115 job descriptions from secretary to janitor to everything under the sun. It'll tell you precisely what you are owed per hour. And it'll tell you all your benefits because you're entitled to them. Medical is supposed to, just on and on and on. You're entitled to tons of benefits. And, for the whole time that you were there. And, here's also a deal. I don't know if you quit or if you were laid off or if you were fired, but
we were laid off in mass layoffs.
Okay, and
we were not given any severance.
Well, you're entitled to severance, and there's an enormous lawsuit. You go to my website, you'll read it. you'll see that it dealt with, it deals with FAS being sued right now, but it gets into the California labor laws out there. And that stuff deals with severance pay. So you guys are probably entitled to a whole lot of stuff. You know, I mean, it's about anything you want. You can go to that website of mine and read. And any questions anybody ever has, if I don't have the answer, I'll put you guys in touch with people whom do have the answers.
So do you think that a lawyer would be interested in working with us?
I think absolutely. I know of 3 different lawyers on both coasts who would be very interested. Now, the SCA, the Service Contract Act, getting your guys' pay, you don't even need a lawyer for that. The state and federal government represent you there. I'll help you all. I'll help you all fill out the forms and all that stuff. But you know, with specificity, and this is where we will all have to, or at least you and I, sit down and talk more and more and drill down to finer detail, because when you start talking, and this gets into who was paid what and all that kind of stuff, into the qui tam matters, those are issues that you would retain counsel and very, very well, quite possibly could be entitled to, you know, settlements in the millions of dollars, you know. So yeah, and I have associates there, you know, 4 large firms that deal with qui tam. They don't pay me. I don't ask you for a dime. You know what? You suffered through it, so hey, you know, I mean, you're deserving. I just do it because at the end of the day, my big goal, like I say, is to bring these people to justice. I mean, from what they've done to other contractors and to myself. You know, I'm blackballed from this industry because I chose to stand up and take a stand, you know.
So has anyone that you know of gotten anything, you know, as a result of coming forward thus far?
Nobody's filed suit yet. Kelly Brown is getting ready to file suit. Now, getting contractors paid, I've gotten probably close to $500,000 returned to contractors. But about 2 years ago, maybe it's 3 years ago, outfit called PK Management down in the Miami area that holds HUD contract, they had misclassified office workers, and there was like a $67,000 settlement that was paid on that. But the reason I can't put my finger on anybody who has received any monies yet is because of the fact that only about a month and a half ago did I actually start stepping in and advocating on behalf of what I call management, you know, or the white-collared workers. You know, nobody had ever come forward and said, hey, you know, I got screwed here, I need some help, will you help us? So and these cases can take anywhere from, you know, 3 to 12 months. So you will actually be the second person, the first lady, and I'll get you her contact information. She just never had time to follow up with it. So in your situation and your colleagues, you know, I feel very comfortable in saying that provided services that you guys were doing were upon HUD properties, slam dunk.
So the girl that was Hispanic sounding with the daughter with the problem, she's not interested?
She was interested. She was, excuse me, I chewed tobacco. She was interested. The child was going into surgery, is what the situation was. And so I think it wasn't that she didn't care. I think, you know, she was simply seriously preoccupied with her child. I don't know if anything, if it was good or bad, how the surgical outcome transpired. But, you know, since now you've spoken with me, it'll give me a reason to drop her an email and say, hey, you know, you have a colleague in arms out there, same company. You know, hopefully, you know, the surgery went well, and would you like to get back into the fray? I think she was just really nervous. I want to say it dealt with the heart. I'm pretty darn sure about that. And so, you know, myself as a father, you know, to me, my kid would be more important than worrying about a bunch of paperwork too.
Did she work in accounting as well?
No, I think she just dealt with the day-to-day work orders.
Huh. I wonder who it was. I'm just trying to think of who has kids that it was mostly men that were doing processing work orders. And Corinna Castaneda was one that jumps at me. Alessa Flores, who didn't have a kid, but maybe she does now.
I'll have you a name probably in about 20 minutes. I'll email it to you. I got to go pull it out of my file. I try not to keep much information at all on my computers or anything. You know, I'm covered under the First Amendment. Just like conversations I have on YouTube, yeah, you got voices, but you know that all that's well and good. But when I put files together, I try to handwrite those, and then whatever I type, I print off and I destroy the file. And it's not so much that I ever worry about anybody's names being released, but you know, here is the reality. You know, my life has been threatened, as has my family, several times. And so in the event that I meet with an untimely demise or somebody breaks in and steals my laptop, I don't want any information on there. You know, I just don't. You know, I know that sounds really ghoulish, but you know, I was told, you know, about 9 months ago, hey, you better be checking your gas lines. And so, and I took that to heart, and I said, well, I'll check my gas lines, and I sent a picture, you know, and we won't get into that. But suffice it to say that at the end of the day, many of these companies are involved with organized crime. You know,
oh,
and
yeah, seems like
so now your situation, there's no company, Miken's not going to come after you and say, oh, we're going to, you know, fuck you up. But in my situation, simply because I'm connecting so many dots, you know, there is the possibility, you know, of hundreds of years in penitentiaries for many people. And so there is a vested interest in removing me from the equation. I live in a county with one stoplight. Literally the whole county only has one stoplight, so it's hard to get to me. But like in your situation, what you're describing, we're just simply going to bring forth, you know, the fact that you weren't paid the amount of monies that you were supposed to be paid. So nobody cares about that. You know, that stuff just writes off.
Yeah.
But when you start talking about things like I say, you know, crossing state lines in the furtherance, you know, to commit wire and mail fraud, you know, to further an ongoing criminal artifice scheme, you know, or something like that, you know, that's a good reason to put a bullet in my head. So I try to keep all the information on paper and isolated. But I know you have to go to work, man. I'll send you this email out. Look at your calendar. I'm going to clear my desk. We'll work around your schedules. I am 600% interested in this, and I'm going to tell you, you know, this story has legs. I mean, you and your colleagues are going to get monies regardless. But you know, like I say, and I never want to kid anybody, my biggest interest is in bringing people to justice.
Yeah. Well, you'll have to let me know who the other person is, and I'll, you know, try to encourage them too.
Oh, yes, ma'am. I'll send it out. It's 2000 hours out here, 8 p.m. You'll have that name over to you by probably about 8:15.
Cool. And then, well, I guess that's it. So it just sucks because I could have taken screenshots and, you know.
You know, I wouldn't worry about that. And I think when all of your colleagues, those whom are interested, you know, become involved, it's the information. It's documenting everybody's story. And when everybody's information starts to line up, then a lawyer comes in and he or she files what's called a motion for discovery. And this is where they come in, because then they can say, hey, there is an email that happened on, you know, the 1st of January, 2011, whatever, and it was written from this person to this person, and we want that presented in court. And if they don't present it in court, then they're held in contempt. So, you know, you did the best thing you did that you could have done because you have your memory. And you see, that's something that can never be taken from anybody, is our memories, and also, you know, duty, honor, and country, standing up and doing the right thing.
Well, I really would like to sock it to them.
Make no mistake, and if you ask around, make no mistake whatsoever. I am the gentleman that does that, and you know, I'm not NBC, ABC, or you know, CBS. You know, I'm the individual that comes in and I tear the teeth out of people's heads, proverbially speaking. I mean, I do. My rhetoric is, I mean, there's venom in my words, and it accomplishes what it's designed to do. My sources are within the Beltway, within Washington, D.C. I'm dealing with Senator Bob Corker's office out here personally. To quote a huge company, Altisource, I deal with their lawyers over in Luxembourg in Europe. And so, there's a lot of things at play. I guarantee you, and I give you my word as, as a veteran, that by Q1 of this coming year, that means between January and March, Miken construction, for all intents and purposes, will probably not be around. The question, the only question in my mind that will remain is who is going to do how much time.
Yeah. Oh, hopefully a lot.
It will be. I'm not going to tie you up. I don't want you to be late for work or anything.
Well, it was nice chatting, and we'll be in touch. So you're going to talk to some people that work with the Department of Labor tomorrow, or?
Yes, ma'am. Both the California Department of Labor, the United States Department of Labor up in D.C., and then I'm also going to reach out to the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development. And then as we start to build upon whom all the clients were of Miken, there's a tremendous amount of other laws. For example, if there are services provided upon VA properties, maybe Miken's portfolio dealt with other companies that they held, prime vendor status with VA, then I'm going to reach out to people like at the VAOALC, which is the Veterans Administration Office of Acquisitions, Logistics, and Contracting. I'm going to reach out to people at the United States Department of Justice. I'm going to reach out to associates that I have within the Internal Revenue Service, probably more specifically at the Ogden Division. I'm going to bring to bear, if you saw Emilio Estevez in Young Guns, reap the whirlwind.
I have one quick question before I go.
Sure.
As far as, so if it's an FHA loan, that may or may not mean it's a HUD property.
Right. FHA, that just merely means who underwrote the funds. But what happens is, let's say a mortgagee took out a loan from Bank of America and it was underwritten by FHA, or it was guaranteed. Well, Bank of America, for whatever reason, couldn't sell it, and so it went to the end of the line, meaning that it didn't sell, and so they want to roll it over into the HUD repository, which then became, post-conveyance. And now, I already had 2 other people confirm to me, and I do have documents that showed Miken Construction was handling HUD properties. So I feel pretty comfortable in saying that you and others are entitled to SCA benefits. And I have that confirmed through multiple people, including several cutout associates of mine at HUD. So I don't think that that's the issue at all. I think it's going to be a matter of drilling down, getting everything on paper, calculating how much time was involved, precisely what tier within the prevailing wage that you are entitled to, also how much health care, the compensation of that, your 401k, your paid time off, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's just merely the situation of adding all that together. And that will actually be done by the California Department of Labor and by the United States Department of Labor. And those people, let me tell you,
so we'll be able to get the ball rolling.
The ball will start rolling in the morning. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
never
go take a shower before work.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to get out of your hair. I appreciate you.
Still there?
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yeah, this is really exciting, and we'll be in touch. Yeah.
Excellent. You'll have my email in about 10 minutes.
With you.
Yes, ma'am. You too. Bye.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it first on Foreclosurepedia. This one, we're going to go deep down the rabbit hole on this one. I'm dumbfounded. There's no other word for it. The Miken Construction, Mid-Ohio Field Services. You can see they're still saying here Reynoldsburg, Ohio. Catella. We're going to drill down. We're going to find out who these people are, what's going on. We're going to see everything that's going on. You can see she spoke of Newman earlier. Danielle Witten and company. Here's Drew. We'll look at Carrie. Let's look at Drew. There's nothing else to say. I'm going to get off here. We'll start getting the ball rolling. If any of you have ever worked for Miken Construction, Mid-Ohio, Catella, in the management aspect, i.e. if you're a paper shuffler or anything, or if any of you were contractors, you're still owed money, you had issues. As a contractor, if you have information to bring to bear, you are entitled to money. Money. Give me a holler. Give me a shout out. COO@foreclosurepedia.org. We're on Twitter. Foreclosurepedia. Google. Foreclosurepedia. D. Paul Williams. I'm telling you, folks. I'm telling you, this thing is huge. This thing is huge. If you do not feel comfortable emailing, give me a call. Give us a call here at the Foreclosurepedia Radio Network. 865-314-7139. The arguments on this podcast cannot be broken. They are accurate. They are truthful. We have the information. And we're coming for you. Give me a holler, shout out, questions, comments, concerns. COO@foreclosurepedia.org. Thank you. God bless America. Have a good evening.